Greetings, YouTube. As I've said in the past, I'm an advocate of science. I'm really fond of it. And one of the aspects of science which I find particularly fascinating are some of the work that's been done on genetics. And I find the entire field of genetically modified organisms to be just wonderful. It is such an interesting field, and we have done so much work. We have the potential for completely changing and improving the world as we know it, as far as pharmaceuticals, food consumption, transplants for organs coming from genetically modified animals. We could save so many human lives. But there are people in the world that don't like the idea of genetically modified organisms, even though we have been genetically modifying organisms for the entire length of the human species. That's what we do. We take animals and we modify them so that they fit our needs. We do it through breeding. In the process, while we are seeking beneficial traits, we often bring along traits we don't want. Whereas genetically modified organisms, you can bring along just the traits you want and avoid the others. So I see it as a more efficient method than the conventional breeding methods that we've used now. For example, sheep used to have much longer legs. We bred them to have short legs so that they could be more easily controlled by us. It also means that sheep don't have much of a chance in the wild. That's why we have to protect them. And there are people that would like to have genetically modified organisms that have been put into food labeled as such. Now, I have a problem with this because there is no evidence that GMO foods are dangerous. I know there are people who are upset about them, that don't like the fact that they exist, and don't want them in the food, but there is no evidence that they're dangerous. And yet they want the food to be labeled that way, and that stigma could adversely affect people's desire to purchase said foods. I even heard someone make a reference that, well, we label tobacco as dangerous, and we label, orange juice from concentrate has to be labeled. Well, orange juice from concentrate, if you pass it off as food that isn't from concentrate, would be fraud. So that's nothing to do with its danger or health risks or benefits. It simply would be untrue to say that it's fresh squeezed when it is in fact not. And as tobacco cannot be used as its intended production method, how it's supposed to be used, without putting the user and those around the user in mortal danger. You are going to harm yourself and those around you with tobacco. Flat out. As John Green once eloquently said, anyone that smokes is smoking to die. And I think that's a very relevant point. So there's a reason you label tobacco as being dangerous, because it is. Whereas GMO foods have been shown not to be dangerous. But something else I've noticed, I was thinking about listening to this report at NPR yesterday while tooling around doing thrifting. I'll have a new thrifting video out this week. That we don't label foods when they contain dihydrogen oxide. We say nothing. Even though dihydrogen oxide is a deadly chemical. It kills thousands of human beings every year. Millions of organisms every year are killed by dihydrogen oxide. It has been dangerous to our species for the entire time we have been here. Our ancestors were endangered by dihydrogen oxide, and yet we don't ever label that on the foods. We don't say contains dihydrogen oxide, a chemical known to harm life. In fact, even if you use dihydrogen oxide as it is intended, you can overdose on it. It is possible. I know someone right now who's in a hospital. It is not allowed to use dihydrogen oxide because it may dilute her electrolytes and cause her to be severely ill. Yet we don't label foods contains dihydrogen oxide, a known dangerous chemical. There's nothing like that in the label. So why isn't there? We know that is dangerous. No doubt, no question. And yet, people want to put labels on foods about GMOs when we don't know that they aren't dangerous. I'm not understanding some of the logic here, and I would truly love if someone could explain it. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Not when I was listening to the radio program, not when I've read articles about the topic, not when I've heard people speak to me about the topic, and not since I heard it and I've had time to ponder it. It still makes absolutely no sense to me. GMOs have been shown not to be dangerous, and dihydrogen oxide is. So, why do we want to label one and not the other? Anybody know?